What were your top schools before deciding on Northwestern?
I was looking. I really locked in on Northwestern early because they had top journalism program, which was the number one thing I was looking for. And just kind of advice I like to give people is that when you have a goal, when you have a destination in mind, then the path becomes apparent to you, right? So knowing that I wanted to be a journalist, knowing that I wanted to get into sports media, the path became apparent. Now my selection process for college got narrowed down to what schools have good journalism programs. I remember writing a letter to the sports editor at the Washington Post and asking his advice. I had met him once. I had a cousin who was a freelance photographer at the Post, and she took me in to the paper, and I got to meet him, and I sent him a letter later just to, what schools would you recommend? And Northwestern was on that list. Georgetown, I got my Georgetown hoodie on for Dikembe. I bought this after Dikembe passed away, so it's kind of an honor. Dikembe Mutombo and John Thompson. But I'd actually visited the campus summer after my junior year of high school. I was on the East Coast, and I checked out Georgetown. And, that was the peak of the Hoya era, right? 85, 86, 87. So you're coming off, they won the championship in 85, back in the Final Four in 85. So Georgetown was hot. That Georgetown starter jacket.
Yes.
I had it. Absolutely.
I had it. Yes. Who had
it? And don't forget the shoes.
The Terminators,
yes,
right?
Sir.
Yeah.
The big blue and gray Terminators. I had a pair of those. Man, those were uncomfortable because they weren't Airs. People called them Air Hoyas. They didn't have that air sole. Those things were hard, man. They were
thick sole. They had a thick sole on them.
But they look good.
They did. They look great.
So Georgetown was in the mix. I was thinking about Penn. Not really sure why, but I think I was going to apply there. I applied to Northwestern early. And then my mom was really adamant that I applied to at least a couple schools in California because, that's where we lived. And she went to UCLA, so I had to apply to UCLA. And I think I applied to Berkeley too. Once you applied to one of the University of California, you could just check different ones that you wanted to apply to.
Mm-hmm.
So I always thought I was going to go to UCLA growing up. I grew up kind of right after the Wooden era, the dynasty. So UCLA basketball was the big thing, right? So I dreamed of playing in Pauley Pavilion and going to UCLA. That was always my thing. But as I started researching, the journalism program just wasn't what I was looking for. So it was, and then I just wanted to get away. I loved living. You asked earlier, well, like, how could you leave? Like, I just wanted something different. I didn't want the cold. I didn't want change of seasons. Some people are like, oh, I want to go somewhere and experience fall and winter. Like, no, I'm good. But this was I was ready to go somewhere else. And I always tell people, like, I wouldn't have had my career. I wouldn't have been at the LA Times for 10 years as a columnist if I hadn't left LA, because I would have had to try to kind of work my way up from the bottom as opposed to coming in at the top. And by starting in Chicago, the boss who hired me at the Sun-Times, Rick Jaffe, he was a sports editor then, and then he had been at the LA Times as he was making his way up, and he always told me, if I ever get back out there, I'm bringing you with me. And sure enough, 2 years later, he went back to the LA Times, and then 3 years after that, he hired me to come out there as a columnist.
Wow.
I wasn't starting off entry level. I was basically starting off high level with a sports column where I could give my opinions. And going to Chicago enabled me to have my dream job in LA.
So look, do you remember your first column you wrote when you got out there?
Yeah, it was, I wanted to have this big thing. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out and write off this game, actually, the Angels. So I was in Orange County, the Orange County edition that they used to have of the LA Times. So it was a lot of Angels and the Mighty Ducks and Cal State Fullerton. And then, so the Clippers used to play a couple games at the Pond in Anaheim. Remember that? Because they are having trouble drawing people to the sports arena, which was their home arena. So they'd play, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 games a year in Anaheim. So anytime they came down there, I would write about that. But I was mostly supposed to write down there. So yeah, the first game I wrote, or the first column I wrote, the LA Times, was just off an Angel game. Ken Hill, the pitcher, whose son, remember his son made it. I'm trying to remember if his son was in the NFL or Major League Baseball, but we were talking about his son too, and I thought back, man, he was who I wrote about in my first column at the LA Times.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
Again, man, I am. It's funny because I remember being in high school. I used to work for our school newspaper. AG asked you the first article you did, and you went to the LA Times. What was that first article in high school?
So it's funny. I told this story in my Hall of Fame speech. So it was about basketball, actually. It was a essay that I wrote for my English class in 9th grade. And my English teacher she was also the advisor for the school newspaper. And so she took my essay and she said, I'm going to run this in the school paper. I said, all right. And that was my first byline and my first story. And that's kind of what gave me the bug. So having that teacher, I would say I had, I grew up kind of modest background. Like we lived in 2 basements when I was a kid. The first place I remember living in Santa Monica, in the basement under a house, they had like a little sub apartment that some space underneath the house. So we lived in that basement. And then when we moved to New York, we were in the basement there. So, I didn't come up in the penthouse at all. But what I did have was an elite education, starting with, going to Crossroads School. My mom, so she was an educator. She taught dance and she worked in the education system. She'd go around to a lot of different schools. And when she saw Crossroads, she just noticed all the students seemed really engaged and vibrant. And she was like, I want that for you. So she got me in and we got to financial aid and I got that elite education opportunity there. And then, I had an elite education opportunity at Northwestern. So I'm very appreciative. Like, I really feel like I owe everything that I had in my life thanks to the education that I received and the great teachers that I had, including Ann Colburn, who was my 9th grade English teacher. So, I asked both you guys about the role of education to you and how you viewed it when we were on that panel. And, I'd say the reason behind that is because education has meant so much to me.
Yeah.
I love that, man. And shout out to your mom.
Yeah, she was great. And really, there were only a couple of things that she made me do, but it was really about school, like a lot of things. And then she really wanted me to go to UCLA, but by that point she was like, all right, if he wants to go to Northwestern, all right, I'm gonna support him in that. And she came around on my love of sport. It's funny. I tell the story, NFL Sundays, right? I'm watching football. It would come on at 10 in the morning in LA all the way through, the Sunday night game would end at like 8 p.m. West Coast. And she walked through the living room one time. I've been sitting there for hours just on the couch watching football. She said, where did I go wrong? But once she realized that I could make a living doing this, there was a viable career path, she got behind it. But even before once I really showed that this was what I wanted to do, she got behind me. But first I had to appease her and follow her choices. But they were both the right choices, and I'm thankful, and I wouldn't have had the life I had without it.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Shout out to Mom. Well, man, you got so many things that AG and I, we won't jump into this basketball world now, man, because we got to pick your brain on so much going on. And the first thing, well, actually, let's do this one first, AG. Before we jump into the basketball thing, I saw a podcast you did, man, and you said something that I thought, just like it had me thinking, and I was thinking about my kids, and it was about you was tying it into what it takes to succeed in sports journalism, and I wanted to know, because you gave 3 traits, and I wanted to know, do you still think those 3 traits apply today when you first did that interview?
I'm trying to remember the 3. I'm pretty sure one of them was curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah. So that one, I was just talking about that again this week. I still think that's the most essential one. You know, you gotta be curious. You gotta ask questions. And that's the privilege of our job is I always tell people we get to ask questions. I thought it was so cool. The video that the NBA did for the induction was, you know, showed me walking and talking to Kevin Garnett and with Kobe and Darren Williams and, you know, Kevin Durant, all these players that I got to talk to. And, you know, with this job, I tell people it's not that, oh, I got to meet them. No, it's I got to ask them questions. And, you know, you just get used to that. You get used to if something happens, I'm going to get to ask them. You know, I got used to being able to do that with Michael Jordan. You know, when I started here in Chicago, and I wasn't even initially on the Bulls beat, but if I needed to ask a question. So first year I was doing the Final Four back in, it was in New Orleans, the 93 Final Four. That was my first year working. And I wanted to do something looking back at the first Final Four there, which was when Michael Jordan, as a freshman, made that shot against Georgetown that really launched his career. Mm-hmm. You know, and I wanted to ask, like, do you ever think about what if you would have missed that shot? And he was like, oh, you know, I can't even think about it. You know, I might not have been here, but, you know, what did that shot mean to you? But the fact that, like, if I had a question that I wanted to ask Michael Jordan, I could go to a Bulls practice or a Bulls game and ask him a question, you know, and just satisfy that urge or that nagging thing. So that curiosity, and then the blessing of this job is having the means to ask those questions and to get those things asked.
Some tough ones.
Answered. Yeah. Sometimes it's tough ones. Yeah. Sometimes it's tough ones. But
you may not, you like one of them questions. One of them questions where you may not like me right now when I ask this question.
Yeah.
But you're going to like me afterwards, but I got to ask the question.
But if it's something controversial, you got to like the fact that I'm giving you the chance to tell your side.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's something that it's actually kind of, you're doing them a service. When you ask them the tough question, you're actually doing them the service because they get to explain. So, you know, why didn't you call a timeout? Or, you know, if you're asking the coach, why did you make this substitution? Or why did you take the foul there? Or whatever question you want to ask that they're going to get criticized for. Well, you're allowing them a chance to explain and to give their perspective. So it's actually kind of when you ask the tough questions, you're actually doing people a favor because you're allowing them to give their side. And, you know, so believe in fairness.
It's so interesting that you say that because I think sports, along with life, the emotions behind it, like how do you as a sports journalist navigate through the emotions of all these different athletes? Because sometimes they take it personal. Sometimes, you know, I mean, I've seen athletes like, I'll never talk to that sports writer ever again. You know, how were you able to navigate through that?
So it's weird because being a journalist, you have to take your emotion out. You have to take your fandom out, right? It's not what you want to see or not who you want to see win the game. It's about who actually won it and why. Now you have to explain why they won it and, you know, or who you really think will win the game based on your analysis, not what your heart wants to see happen. Right. So, so I can take my emotion out of it, but realizing that you're dealing with people who have a lot invested in it. Although I will say this, like, especially like when you cover an NBA team, for example, they have to take their emotion out because you realize the way that the players and the coaches view these is so different from the fans are. Because if you're a player, you cannot go like this up and down every game for 82 games. Mm-hmm. You just can't function that way. You can't be an emotional wreck if you lose, and you can't, you know, act like you won the championship if you won game 3 in November, right? So seeing how the professionals deal with it, they're actually not that emotional. So I think, as a reporter, taking your emotions out, but also recognizing that the players professionally have to approach this as their job, and they're a little bit less emotional. So whether there are less emotions involved than you might think, until you get to the last game. So now the finals is emotional, but also recognizing that emotions cloud things. One thing I learned when it was in college and someone would lose in a tournament and, you know, they could be drafted, and whatever they say about going pro or not, because it's a very emotional, that's one time they are emotional because their season just ended. And so they might get caught up in the feelings like, oh, I love my teammates here and I love going to school here at University of North Carolina or whatever. I think I want to come back. That's their emotions talking then. And then a week or two later, and, they've done their due diligence and they're being told, hey, you could be a top 10 draft pick. Like, peace, I'm out. So I always say, man, never listen to what people say about major decisions right after they lost, because that's one time they are emotional. But for most of the year, you can take emotions out of the equation, both from the reporter's perspective and from the athlete.
Have you also seen that too from the players as they are nearing retirement too? They get more emotional up at the podiums now?
Yeah, and reflective. And, I remember, Kobe, his whole last year, he tried to play it cool and tried to act like, he was in control of everything. And so his last press conference, you're only allowed one question each, and I'd already asked my question. And then I realized, I'm like, hold up, he's still wearing his jersey. And, the only time you'd see him wear his jersey into the press conference was when they won a championship. That was something he got from Michael, because Michael's thing with the Bulls was when you win, you got to wear your jersey all night. Wear it out to the club, like you're wearing your jersey all night. That's what we're doing when we win. And so Kobe instituted those rules with the Lakers. When you win, you got to wear your jersey all night afterward. But here they had one. It was the last game of the regular season. They didn't qualify for the playoffs. And this was his last game. And he shows up to the press conference, like 20 minutes after the game, and he's still wearing his jersey. And I already asked my question, but I turned to my colleague, Bill Plaskett. I said, hey, man, ask Kobe if he doesn't want to take his jersey off because it's the last time he's going to wear it. And so he asked Kobe, and Kobe's like, no, I just haven't. At first he tried to deny it. He's like, you can tell yourself that if you want. It's a cute story, but like, no, that's not the reason. And then he came around. He's like, yeah, you're right. I don't want to take it off.
Wow.
So that was that one moment where like he just did not want to let it go. He got to the end, he'd been bracing for it. He announced like back in November that this was going to be his last go round. But when that moment arrived, he was really having trouble taking that jersey off for the last time.
Boy, do we miss Kobe, man. We'll joke about that, man.
So one thing, guys, could I ask you? I can't help it. I go into journalism.
You just spoke his name, and I just got chills.
Yeah.
Well, what's weird? It's like I still have a hard time processing that he's gone. He doesn't feel gone to me because he pops up every day somewhere, in the media. Or in my photo archives, like a lot of, your phone will show you photos from this date 10 years ago or whatever, so he still pops up and stuff like that. His name is everywhere. So in some ways it doesn't feel like he's gone, but that moment of the last thing, because I was thinking, because we don't see the end arrive for you guys, in the movie is still, you guys are still kind of holding out hope, that it's going to happen for you. So when that moment did happen, when you realized, when was that for you guys? Where were you, and when was that last game, and then what was that like for you?